The sterile white walls of the hospital room seemed to close in around me, each breath a painful effort, each heartbeat a fragile drum against the silence. My name is Elias Thorne, and at 62 years old, I had always believed I had a good handle on life, on my family. Lying there, hooked up to tubes and machines in Sterling City, New York, I was closer to death than I had ever been. A sudden, massive heart attack had pulled me into this terrifying limbo. My children, David and Sarah, had been a constant presence, or so I thought. They visited daily, brought flowers, and spoke in hushed, concerned tones. I remember thinking, even through the fog of pain medication and the general weakness that enveloped me, that I had raised good children loving children. They were my world, the legacy I had poured everything into. I had worked tirelessly my entire life. I started Thorne Construction from the ground up with nothing but a beat-up pickup truck and a toolbox. I built it into a reputable company that provided well for me and, more importantly, for them. Every decision I made, every extra hour I put in was for David and Sarah. Their mother, my beloved Eleanor, had passed away years ago, leaving me to raise them alone. I was both mother and father, provider and protector. I wanted them to have the best. I sent them to the finest schools, paid for their college degrees without a single student loan on their part, and helped them both buy their first homes. David, with his degree in finance, always seemed a bit more entitled, expecting things to be handed to him. Sarah, my sweet Sarah, or so I thought, had studied marketing but struggled to find her footing, always needing a bit of a financial boost from me. I never once questioned it. I saw it as my duty, my joy, to support them. I loved them fiercely. I gave them expensive cars, luxury vacations, and always made sure they never wanted for anything. My will, as it stood, was simple. Everything I owned, every single dollar, every piece of property, was to be split equally between my two precious children. It was a testament to my love, a final act of devotion. I had often pictured them, after I was gone, using that inheritance to build even better lives for themselves, perhaps making smart investments, or finally pursuing their true passions without financial worry. I believed my wealth would be a blessing, a foundation for their happiness. I wanted their lives to be easier, less burdened than mine had been. That was my greatest wish. I lay there, drifting in and out, listening to the soft hum of the machines, feeling their hands on my forehead, hearing their voices. I was weak, but I was still Elias Thorne, their father, the man who loved them more than life itself. What I was about to hear would shatter that entire world into a million irreparable pieces. It was a truth so bitter, so cold, that it would make the icy grip of death seem almost comforting by comparison. And that was just the beginning. The fluorescent lights of the intensive care unit blurred above me as I slowly regained a semblance of consciousness. My chest felt like a brick had been placed squarely on it, but the sharpest pain wasn't physical. It was the whispers. They were soft at first, like distant echoes, but as my mind cleared, they solidified, taking on a horrifying clarity. David and Sarah. They were in my room, standing near the foot of my bed, just out of my direct line of sight. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing shallow, feigning deep sleep. It was easier that way, less effort than trying to open my heavy eyelids. "It's been, 3 days now?" David's voice, usually so confident, was hushed, almost eager. "The doctor said his heart is barely holding on." Sarah replied, her voice tinged with what I now recognize as a forced solemnity, not genuine sadness. "Any news on, the timeline?" I felt a cold dread creep into my veins, a chilling premonition that something was terribly wrong. My children talking about my death, of course they would be concerned. They loved me. But the tone, the unspoken expectation, sent shivers down my spine. "Dr. Henderson said it's touch and go. Could be days, could be a week if he's lucky," David scoffed, and I heard the unmistakable sound of him checking his watch. My heart, the very organ that was failing me, lurched in my chest. Lucky. They thought it was lucky for me to die. "So the house," Sarah continued, her voice gaining a little more strength, a little more focus. "Are we thinking of selling it right away, or should one of us move in?" "Move in." "Sarah, be serious," David chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "That house is prime real estate. Sterling City is booming. We sell it, split the proceeds, and then we can finally get those condos we talked about." But what about Dad's investments? Sarah asked, a note of greed now openly evident in her voice. He always talked about his portfolio being extensive, and the business, Thorn Construction. Are we partners automatically? Of course we are, David said, a hint of annoyance in his tone. That's why he made us directors, remember, just a formality until now. The lawyers will handle everything, I've already looked into it. Once he's gone, it's ours, all of it. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not just a knife, but a cleaver splitting me open, exposing the raw, tender flesh of my love and trust. My children, my beloved children, they weren't mourning me. They were planning my funeral like a business meeting, calculating their inheritance, already dividing my life's work between them. I felt a wave of nausea, not from the medication but from the sickening realization. I had been nothing more than a bank account, a means to an end. All the sacrifices, all the endless hours, all the love I had poured into them had apparently only served to fuel their greed. Tears, hot and stinging, welled in my eyes, but I kept them closed, forcing myself to remain still to appear unconscious. I couldn't let them know I heard. I couldn't bear to see their faces, knowing what I now knew. The pain in my chest was nothing compared to the agony in my soul. My world, the one I had so carefully constructed with love and devotion, had crumbled into dust. But even in that moment of profound despair, a tiny, defiant spark ignited within me. A cold, hard resolve. I would not die, not like this. I would not let them win. I would not be their easy mark. And as the doctors came in for their rounds and David and Sarah quickly adopted a somber, concerned facade, I vowed to myself that they would not get a single red cent from the man they were so eagerly waiting to bury. My fight for life had just become a fight for justice, and they had absolutely no idea what was coming for them. This was not the end. It was a terrifying, painful beginning. The road to recovery was grueling, a relentless battle against a body that felt determined to give up. Every step on the treadmill, every bite of the bland hospital food, every forced smile I gave the nurses and doctors was a conscious effort fueled by a new, burning purpose. David and Sarah continued their visits, their performances growing increasingly elaborate. They brought me comfort items, read to me from books I barely registered, and spoke endlessly about my recovery, always with an undertone of feigned optimism that barely masked their impatience. I played along, feigning weakness, a little confusion, a fragile hope for the future. I learned to read their faces, to interpret their subtle glances, the way their eyes would flicker to the clock or their phones whenever they thought I wasn't looking. Their concern was a thin veneer, easily seen through by my now hardened gaze. During those long nights in the hospital, when the ward was quiet and only the beeping machines kept me company, I meticulously planned my next moves. My mind, sharp as ever, began to sift through decades of financial decisions, legal documents, and personal interactions. I remembered Mr. Peterson, my longtime attorney, a man I trusted implicitly. He had handled all my business and personal affairs for 30 years. He would be the first step. Once I was strong enough to leave the hospital, the real work would begin. I focused on my physical therapy with a ferocity that surprised even the nurses. Each push, each pull, each agonizing stretch was a small victory, a defiant middle finger to the fate my children had so eagerly awaited for me. They would see me get better, they would see me return home, and they would believe their plans were simply delayed. They had no idea they were witnessing the quiet forging of a weapon. When I was finally discharged, nearly 2 months after my heart attack, I was still frail, but my mind was clearer than ever. David and Sarah were there, of course, with balloons and overly enthusiastic hugs. "Welcome home, Dad," Sarah exclaimed, practically pushing me into the house. "We cleaned everything up for you. You just rest." David added, his arm around my shoulder, a gesture that felt utterly hollow. I smiled weakly, thanking them, allowing myself to be fussed over. They were playing their part perfectly, and I was playing mine. The day after I settled back into my routine, I called Mr. Peterson. "Elias, my friend, so good to hear your voice," he boomed, genuine warmth radiating through the phone. "I was so worried. How are you feeling?" "Much better, Robert. Stronger every day," I replied, my voice steady. "I need to see you. There are some urgent matters I need to discuss regarding my will and my business. Can you come to the house tomorrow morning? And please, discretion is paramount. Of course, Elias, my lips are sealed. I'll be there at 9 sharp, he assured me. The next morning, Mr. Peterson arrived precisely on time. I had arranged for David and Sarah to be out. Sarah had a hair appointment and David had a golf game. They never suspected a thing. We sat in my study, the same room where I had drafted my initial will years ago, the one that left everything to them. Robert, I began, my voice low and even, I've had a profound change of heart. My time in the hospital being so close to the edge, it made me reevaluate everything. My priorities, my legacy, my family. I then recounted without emotion, without embellishment, the conversation I had overheard. Robert listened, his face a mask of carefully controlled shock, his hand occasionally rubbing his chin. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Elias, he said finally, his voice equally grave, I don't know what to say, that's truly heartbreaking. Heartbreaking, yes, but also illuminating, I countered. My children, Robert, they were waiting for me to die. They saw my life as a financial transaction. They saw me as a wallet, not a father. He nodded slowly. So what are your instructions? I looked him directly in the eye. I want to rewrite my will completely. Every clause, every beneficiary. I want them to receive nothing. Not a single dollar, not a single asset. I want to disinherit them entirely. Robert's eyebrows rose. Elias, that's a monumental decision. Are you absolutely certain? Never been more certain in my life, I affirmed. This isn't about anger, Robert. This is about justice. It's about ensuring that my legacy goes to those who deserve it, or to causes that will do good in the world, not to two individuals who saw my death as their come-up. We spent the next few days in deep consultation. Robert helped me establish a charitable trust, the Eleanor Thorne Foundation, in my late wife's name, dedicated to supporting young entrepreneurs and community development in Sterling City. A significant portion of my estate would go there. I also made provisions for my loyal employees at Thorne Construction, setting up retirement funds and bonuses for those who had worked tirelessly by my side for decades. I even ensured a generous sum was set aside for my devoted housekeeper, Maria, who had been with our family for 20 years and had shown me more genuine care in my illness than my own flesh and blood. Meanwhile, David and Sarah continued their charade. They would call daily, pop in for short, insincere visits, and always subtly steer the conversation back to my health, my energy levels, my prognosis. Dad, are you feeling well enough to go over those investment papers? David would ask, a glint in his eye, trying to gauge if I was lucid enough to discuss my assets. I was just thinking about how much work it must be to maintain such a big house. Sarah would sigh dramatically, clearly hinting at the burden I would soon pass on to them. I would just smile, feign a little fatigue, and assure them everything was being taken care of. I even pretended to forget minor details, to play up the image of a man whose mind was not quite what it used to be. It helped them relax, helped them believe they had me right where they wanted me. They would occasionally bicker over hypothetical scenarios of how they'd split my artwork or who would get my vintage car, assuming I was too senile to understand. My heart would ache, but my resolve solidified. Every time they showed their true colors, it reinforced my decision. This wasn't revenge born of petty spite. It was the elegant, undeniable truth being laid bare. They had stripped me of my dignity, of my love, and in return I would strip them of their expectations. They were living in a fool's paradise, completely oblivious that the ground beneath them was slowly, meticulously being prepared for a seismic shift. The trap was almost ready to snap shut, and they would never see it coming. The day arrived like any other, a crisp autumn morning in Sterling City, the leaves outside my study window painted in hues of fiery red and deep gold. I had invited David and Sarah for what I called a family meeting. I told them I wanted to discuss my future, how I envisioned spending my remaining years, and to outline some plans for the business. Their eagerness was almost comical. They arrived punctually, dressed impeccably, their smiles radiating an almost predatory anticipation. They probably thought this was it, the moment I'd finally lay out my wishes for the distribution of my assets, perhaps even hand over the reins of Thorne Construction. They had no idea they were walking into their own carefully constructed nightmare. I had set up the meeting in my study, the large oak desk between us, a symbol of my authority and control. Robert Peterson, my attorney, was already present, sitting discreetly in an armchair to my left. His presence immediately put a nervous edge on David and Sarah's faces. They exchanged quick, worried glances. "Mr. Peterson, what a surprise," David said, trying to sound nonchalant, but his voice was a little strained. "Is everything all right, Dad?" Sarah asked, her smile faltering. "Everything is perfectly all right, children," I said, my voice calm, almost serene. I gestured for them to sit, which they did, perched on the edge of their seats, their eyes darting between me and Robert. "I've called you here today for a very important discussion. As you know, my recent health scare made me reevaluate many things." I paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. David cleared his throat, unable to hold back. "Yes, Dad, we understand, and we're so glad you're recovering. We're here to support you in whatever you need." Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "Absolutely, Dad, we're your family." I met their gaze one at a time, allowing a faint, knowing smile to play on my lips. "Family, yes. It's a powerful word, isn't it?" I leaned forward slightly. "And it was the thought of my family that kept me fighting in that hospital bed. The thought of all the years I poured into you, all the love, all the sacrifices. I believed I was creating a legacy, a foundation for your happiness." Their expressions softened, a flicker of guilt perhaps, or just the expectation that I was about to praise them and outline their upcoming riches. "I also heard things in that hospital, things I wasn't supposed to hear," I continued, my voice still even but a steel edge now present that made them visibly flinch. David's face paled immediately. Sarah's eyes widened, a dawning horror creeping into them. "Dad, what are you talking about?" David stammered, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "I'm talking about two children, two people I loved more than life itself, standing at the foot of my bed, openly discussing my impending death," I stated, my gaze piercing. "Discussing how long I had left, how quickly you could sell my house, how you would divide my investments and assume control of Thorn Construction." The air in the room became thick with an almost suffocating silence. David looked like he had seen a ghost, his mouth agape. Sarah put a hand to her chest, her breath catching in her throat. Their faces, usually so composed, now contorted with a mixture of shock, shame, and rising panic. "Dad, no, that's not. You must have misunderstood," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "We were just worried, speculating. It was a stressful time." "Stressed about how to divvy up my estate, yes, I gathered that," I interrupted, my voice still calm but radiating an icy authority. "You were lucky if I died quickly, David, if I recall your exact words. And Sarah, you were already mentally furnishing your new condo with the proceeds from my supposed demise." David tried to speak, but only a strangled sound escaped his lips. He looked desperate, his eyes pleading. "I have never in my life felt such profound betrayal," I continued, ignoring their attempts to interrupt. "To realize that the people I dedicated my life to, the children I adored, saw me only as an inconvenience, a source of wealth to be plundered upon my death. It was a revelation that cured me of any remaining weakness. It gave me a new purpose to live, not just for myself, but to ensure true justice." I pushed a button on my desk and Maria, my housekeeper, entered, carrying a tray with 3 elegant-looking envelopes. She placed one in front of David, one in front of Sarah, and kept one for me. She then quietly exited the room. "These are not invitations, nor are they birthday cards," I explained. "These are copies of my updated last will and testament." David's hand trembled as he reached for the envelope. Sarah stared at hers as if it were a venomous snake. "Mr. Peterson was instrumental in helping me revise it thoroughly," I added, glancing at Robert, who simply gave a slight, solemn nod. "You see, my original will, the one that left everything to you, was a testament to my love. This new will, however, is a testament to my clarity." David tore open his envelope, his eyes scanning the document frantically. Sarah, more hesitant, slowly pulled out the papers. As they read, the color drained from their faces entirely. Their eyes moved rapidly across the pages, searching for their names, for the familiar clauses of inheritance. But their names were absent, completely. Replaced by the Alina Thorne Foundation, by clauses for my employees, for Maria, for various local charities. What is this? This is a joke, right, Dad? David finally managed to gasp, his voice hoarse, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. He looked up at me, his eyes wild. You've disinherited us, you can't do this. Oh, but I can, David, and I have, I replied, my voice unwavering. Every penny, every asset, every single piece of property I own, including Thorn Construction, is now allocated elsewhere. You will receive nothing. Zero. Zilch. The only thing you inherit from me is the knowledge of your own greed and the consequence of your actions. Sarah let out a choked sob, tears streaming down her face, but I knew they were tears of fury and disappointment, not genuine sorrow. But the house, my loan, my business venture, she cried, sounding like a spoiled child denied a toy. You promised, you said you would always take care of us. I promised to take care of children who respected me, who loved me genuinely, I countered, the calmness in my voice making my words even more devastating. I did not promise to fund the lavish lifestyles of two individuals who saw their father as a stepping stone to their own enrichment. My support was conditional on loyalty, on respect, conditions you both failed to meet spectacularly. David slammed his hand on the desk, making the papers jump. This is insane. We'll contest it. We'll take you to court. We'll prove you're mentally unfit. His voice rose to a shout, his composure completely shattered. You are clearly not in your right mind, Dad. Are you sure you want to go down that road, David? Robert Peterson interjected, his voice surprisingly firm. Elias has undergone thorough medical evaluations. His mind is sound, and he has detailed, verifiable records of his intentions, including consultations with me over the past several weeks. Any attempt to contest this would be futile and incredibly expensive. Furthermore, Robert continued, looking pointedly at David, any frivolous lawsuits could incur additional legal penalties. I merely watched their unraveling. Their initial shock was now giving way to unbridled fury. David lunged forward, his face inches from mine, his eyes blazing. You old fool, you think you can just cut us out after everything, after all we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, David? I asked softly, my gaze never leaving his. Aside from waiting for me to die and planning how to spend my money, Sarah, meanwhile, had dropped her papers and was openly weeping, a pathetic, wailing sound. I can't believe this, Dad. How could you do this to your own children? I didn't do this to you, Sarah, I replied, a weariness entering my voice. You did this to yourselves. You chose greed over love, inheritance over family, and these are the consequences of those choices. The climax of my plan was complete. The trap had snapped shut. They stood there, utterly broken, not by my death as they had hoped, but by my very survival. The look on their faces, the dawning horror of their complete and utter loss, was more satisfying than any financial gain. They had thought they had won, but they had lost everything, and it was a defeat they had orchestrated entirely on their own. The aftermath was a storm, contained mostly within the walls of my home, but the ripples began to spread quickly through Sterling City's social circles. David and Sarah's initial shock gave way to a furious, sustained assault. They screamed, they pleaded, they threatened. For weeks, my phone rang incessantly with their angry calls, their desperate voicemails, their accusations. They accused me of senility, of being brainwashed, of being a cruel and heartless monster. They tried to rally relatives, painting me as an unhinged old man, but I remained steadfast. My resolve was iron. I had Mr. Peterson handle all communications, all legal threats. He sent them certified letters, outlining their complete disinheritance and the futility of any legal action. He reminded them that I had full mental capacity, had undergone multiple psychological evaluations to ensure my will would be ironclad, and had meticulous documentation of my wishes. Their threats of contesting the will, of dragging my name through the mud, quickly dissipated as they realized they had no legal ground, and no financial means to even attempt such a costly fight. The first immediate consequence was financial. David, who had always lived slightly beyond his means, found himself in a precarious position. The down payment on his luxurious new car, which he had bragged about, was based on the imminent inheritance. His mortgage, which I had implicitly guaranteed through ongoing gifts, suddenly felt much heavier without my regular infusions of cash. He called frantic, demanding I continue to support him. "Dad, I need help. I can't make rent. I can't make my car payments," he would shout. "You left me in a terrible situation." "No, David," I responded, my voice calm. "You left yourself in a terrible situation when you chose to gamble on my death instead of building your own responsible life. Your financial woes are your own creation. I am no longer your personal ATM." Sarah, who had taken out a substantial loan to start a boutique, believing her father's backing was absolute, found her business venture crumbling. Her investor, knowing she was cut off from my wealth, pulled out. Her dream, built on my anticipated money, vanished. She too called, weeping, accusing me of ruining her life. "My business is gone, Dad, my reputation. What am I supposed to do now?" "You're supposed to stand on your own 2 feet, Sarah, like every other adult in this world," I told her, the words tasting bitter but necessary. "You were given every advantage. You squandered it waiting for a handout that will never come." The public shame, while not overtly orchestrated by me, manifested through their own actions. Their bitterness and rage spilled out. They gossiped, they complained, they painted me as a villain to anyone who would listen. But Sterling City is a small place, and many knew of my generosity over the years. Many also knew David and Sarah's penchant for expensive tastes and their reliance on my money. When the story of the new will slowly began to circulate, people connected the dots. The knowing glances, the hushed conversations when David or Sarah walked into a room, the sudden coolness from former friends, it all started to affect them. They were no longer the privileged Thorne children. They were the Thorne children who tried to profit from their father's near death and got nothing. Their social standing, once propped up by my name and my money, began to crumble. They were no longer invited to the same elite gatherings, no longer seen as desirable connections. They had lost not just money, but respect, and in their world, that was perhaps an even greater punishment. My employees at Thorne Construction, the ones who received the bonuses and had their futures secured by the Alina Thorne Foundation, were incredibly grateful. Their loyalty, which had always been genuine, deepened. They saw the true Elias Thorne, a man of integrity who rewarded hard work and kindness. Maria, my housekeeper, wept tears of joy and gratitude when she learned of the provision I had made for her. "Mr. Thorne, you are too kind," she had sobbed. "More than my own family, you have looked out for me." Her words echoed my own painful realization. My real family, it turned out, was not defined by blood, but by loyalty, by genuine care, by shared humanity. In the months that followed, I found a profound peace. I dedicated myself to the Alina Thorne Foundation, pouring my energy and remaining wealth into projects that genuinely helped people. We funded scholarships for students from struggling families, provided grants for small local businesses, and built a community center. I spent my days meeting people who were genuinely grateful, whose lives were truly touched by my generosity. It felt good, deeply satisfying to see my wealth used for purpose, for positive impact, instead of being wasted on the empty pursuits of two self-serving individuals. I resumed my hobbies, played more golf, traveled to places I had always dreamed of seeing. I made new friends, people who valued me for who I was, not for what I had. I learned that true riches are not measured in dollars but in genuine connections, in peace of mind, and in contributing something meaningful to the world. As for David and Sarah, their lives continued on a downward spiral. David lost his job, unable to maintain his focus or his performance under the weight of his financial and social downfall. He ended up taking a much lower-paying position in another city, a shadow of his former arrogant self. Sarah's boutique dream never materialized, and she moved back into a small apartment, forced to work retail jobs, struggling to make ends meet. They occasionally tried to contact me, usually when they were in dire straits, but my door remained closed. My heart, once brimming with unconditional love for them, had hardened into a quiet understanding. I bore them no malice, no lingering hatred, just a profound sadness for what could have been, and a complete certainty that I had made the right choice. My recovery from the heart attack had indeed changed everything. It had not only saved my life but had given me a clearer vision of who I was and who my children truly were. I had faced death, and in doing so I had learned to live, truly live, for the first time in a very long time. Loyalty, I learned, cannot be bought. It must be earned through genuine affection and respect. Greed, left unchecked, will consume everything, leaving only a hollow shell of human connection. My justice was not about inflicting pain, but about restoring balance. It was about ensuring that the fruits of my labor went to nourish true growth, not to feed parasitic expectations. And in that quiet, elegant justice, I found my ultimate satisfaction, a tranquility that no amount of money could ever buy. My life, once nearly extinguished, now shone brighter, purer than ever before. My life, once nearly extinguished, now shone brighter, purer than ever before. The immediate shockwave from that fateful family meeting had begun to dissipate, but the tremors it caused continued to shake David and Sarah's lives to their very foundations. Their initial fury, a raw, almost childish outrage, quickly turned into a desperate scramble to find any loophole, any crack in the armor I had meticulously built around my estate. They hired their own lawyers, lesser-known firms undoubtedly, ones they could barely afford, all eager to take on a perceived Goliath like Elias Thorne. They spent weeks digging, probing, demanding copies of documents, hoping to uncover some flaw, some sign of my supposed mental incapacitation. But Robert Peterson had been thorough, anticipating every potential challenge. Every psychological evaluation, every consultation, every amendment to my will was meticulously documented, dated, and witnessed. The paper trail was as ironclad as the reinforced concrete foundations Thorne Construction was famous for. Their legal challenges quickly sputtered and died, leaving them not only without an inheritance, but with mounting legal bills that only deepened their financial despair. David, always the more volatile of the two, reacted with outright hostility. He saw me as a personal enemy, a vengeful patriarch deliberately destroying his future. He began to spread malicious rumors, distorted versions of the truth, painting me as a tyrannical old man who had lost his mind and turned against his own flesh and blood. He implied I was being manipulated, that Robert Peterson was somehow coercing me. But the people of Sterling City, many of whom had known me for decades, many of whom had worked for Thorne Construction or benefited from my quiet philanthropy, knew better. They had witnessed my unwavering generosity towards my children over the years, often shaking their heads at David's lavish spending and Sarah's constant need for investment opportunities. So, when David's whispers reached their ears, they were met not with sympathy, but with suspicion. His reputation, already teetering on the edge of entitlement, now plummeted into outright scorn. He was no longer the promising young finance professional. He was the ungrateful son who had tried to capitalize on his father's death. Invitations to exclusive golf clubs and charity galas, once extended automatically, ceased. Business associates began to politely distance themselves. David found his carefully constructed network dissolving around him, a direct consequence of his own bitter tongue. His job, which had seemed secure, became precarious. His bosses, sensing the shift in public opinion, and perhaps weary of his increasingly erratic behavior and constant complaints about his unjust situation, began to scrutinize his performance more closely. Without the implicit safety net of my wealth, without the expectation of a significant inheritance that had fueled his recklessness, David's life began to unravel with alarming speed. Sarah's reaction was more insidious, a manipulative blend of victimhood and thinly veiled anger. She initially tried to play the role of the heartbroken daughter, sending me tearful voicemails, begging for understanding, for a chance to explain. "Dad, please, you don't understand. We were scared. We love you. We never meant any harm." But her words rang hollow, tainted by the memory of her eager questions about my house and her condo dreams. When her pleas fell on deaf ears, when my phone remained silent to her increasingly desperate calls, her tone shifted. She began to tell a different story to anyone who would listen, portraying me as a man who had suddenly turned cold and cruel, abandoning his ailing daughter. She spoke of her failed business venture, deliberately omitting the part where it was funded by an anticipated inheritance that she expected, not earned. She even tried to invoke sympathy by exaggerating my supposed frailty during my recovery, claiming I was not of sound mind and that I had been unduly influenced. But like David, her words carried little weight. People remembered her expensive handbags, her luxury vacations, her string of financially questionable passion projects that always seemed to require my financial intervention. The small boutique she had envisioned, the one that had been prematurely celebrated, now became a symbol of her inability to stand on her own. Her investor, a shrewd businessman named Thomas Miller, had indeed pulled out, not because of my disinheritance directly, but because Sarah's business plan, propped up by the promise of my endless funding, revealed itself to be fundamentally unsound once that prop was removed. He saw her for what she was, a privileged woman with grand ideas and no real understanding of how to make a profit. Without the cash flow, her boutique dream died a quiet, ignominious death, leaving her with significant personal debt and a tarnished reputation in the local business community. She found herself working low-paying retail jobs, something she had always disdained, unable to escape the shadow of her former expectations. The irony was palpable. She, who had once sneered at the idea of just working retail, now found herself doing exactly that, a stark and public testament to her financial reality. Meanwhile, my life continued to flourish, anchored in a new sense of purpose and genuine connection. The Alina Thorne Foundation, established in my beloved wife's memory, became the central focus of my days. Robert Peterson, still my trusted attorney and now a close friend, helped me navigate the complexities of running a successful charitable organization. We assembled a small but dedicated board, comprised of individuals who shared my vision for Sterling City, community leaders, educators, and local entrepreneurs who believed in giving back. Our first major project was a scholarship program for bright, underprivileged students, ensuring they could attend college without the burden of student loans, something I had done for my own children without a second thought. I attended the awards ceremonies, met the students and their grateful families, and saw the genuine hope in their eyes. Their ambition, their drive, their sheer joy at the opportunity to pursue higher education was a stark contrast to the entitled expectations I had grown accustomed to from David and Sarah. Their heartfelt thanks, their genuine appreciation, nourished my soul in a way money never could. We also launched a grant program for small businesses, providing seed money and mentorship to local entrepreneurs who demonstrated passion, innovation, and a commitment to their community. I relished visiting these fledgling businesses, a bakery that hired formerly incarcerated individuals, a tech startup developing accessible education software, a community garden initiative. These were people building something real, contributing to the fabric of Sterling City, not simply consuming. Their success, even in small ways, felt like a personal triumph, a far more meaningful legacy than simply passing on inherited wealth. My loyal employees at Thorne Construction thrived under the new provisions. The retirement funds I established for them, the generous bonuses, and the clear path forward for the company under a new, carefully selected management team instilled a renewed sense of loyalty and morale. The company, once built on my singular vision, now had a secure future that benefited those who had truly built it alongside me. They saw my actions not as a betrayal of my children, but as a just reward for their dedication. Maria, my beloved housekeeper, became more than an employee. She was family. The provision I had made for her meant she could finally buy a small house in her home country for her aging mother, a dream she had held for years. Her gratitude was boundless, expressed not in grand gestures but in quiet kindnesses. An extra cup of my favorite tea, a perfectly ironed shirt, a comforting presence. She often spoke of her own children, hardworking and humble, who regularly called and visited, demonstrating a love that was unconditional, not transactional. Her example served as a gentle reminder that genuine family bonds were still possible, just not with David and Sarah. As months turned into a year, and then several years, the chasm between my life and that of my children grew wider and deeper. My health, buoyed by my renewed purpose and inner peace, continued to improve dramatically. My doctors were amazed at my recovery, crediting my positive outlook and active lifestyle. I took up painting again, a hobby I had abandoned during my relentless pursuit of wealth. I traveled extensively, exploring ancient ruins in Rome, hiking in the Swiss Alps, and enjoying leisurely cruises through the Caribbean. I met fascinating people, made new friends who knew nothing of my past family dramas and who valued me for my stories, my experiences, and my quiet wisdom. My peace was profound, untroubled by regret or lingering anger. I had made my decision and I stood by it, understanding that sometimes the greatest act of love is also the hardest. It's the act of letting go, of allowing others to face the consequences of their own choices. David, unable to hold down a stable job in Sterling City, eventually moved to a different state, ostensibly for a fresh start. But the patterns of entitlement and blaming others followed him. I heard through the grapevine that he struggled, moving from one short-term position to another, his once sharp financial mind dulled by bitterness and a complete lack of accountability. He squandered any remaining savings trying to chase get-rich-quick schemes, convinced that the world owed him something. He married briefly, a whirlwind romance with someone equally financially unstable, and that, too, ended in acrimony and debt. His arrogance, once merely irritating, had calcified into a hardened cynicism, pushing away anyone who might have offered genuine support. He would occasionally send me a hostile email, always with a thinly veiled demand for money, claiming I had ruined his life, that I owed him. My replies, sent through Robert, were always the same, brief, polite, and firmly reiterating that my decision was final. Sarah's path was equally bleak, though perhaps less publicly dramatic. She never truly recovered from the financial and social fallout. She found herself perpetually struggling, working multiple low-wage jobs, unable to escape the cycle of debt. Her dream of a glamorous life, once so close, seemed forever out of reach. Her friends, those fair-weather companions who had admired her for her access to my wealth, slowly faded away. She became increasingly isolated, her only real solace in complaining about my supposed cruelty to anyone who would listen, always omitting her own role in the drama. She never married, never built the family she claimed to desire, her bitterness acting as a repellent to genuine connection. There was one particularly cold winter afternoon, nearly 5 years after the family meeting, when my phone rang, displaying Sarah's name. I hesitated, then answered. Her voice was thin, raspy, not the confident, sometimes whiny tone I remembered. "Dad," she began, a desperate edge to her voice, I just wanted to see how you were. I heard you're doing well. The foundation. It's really making a difference." There was a long pause, then a choked sob. I wish things had been different, Dad, I really do." My heart, which had been so hardened against them, felt a pang not of pity but of profound sadness for her lost potential. "Things are different, Sarah, because of choices made," I responded, my voice gentle but firm. "Choices have consequences. You chose a path and I chose mine." She pleaded for just a little help, a loan, anything to get her back on her feet, promising she had changed, that she understood now. But I had heard those promises before, seen those tears, and remembered the icy calculations in her voice as she discussed my death. "I wish you well, Sarah," I said, my voice unwavering. "But my help, my financial support, it ended that day in my study. My legacy is now with the foundation, with those who truly need it and who genuinely appreciate the opportunity." I could hear her sharp intake of breath, a defeated sigh, before she hung up. It was the last time I ever spoke to either of them. My legacy, indeed, was etched not in the hands of two ungrateful children, but in the flourishing lives of scholarship recipients, the vibrant hum of new businesses, the laughter emanating from community centers, and the secure retirements of my loyal employees. I continued to oversee the Eleanor Thorne Foundation with passion and dedication, watching it grow into a formidable force for good in Sterling City and beyond. I knew I wouldn't live forever, but I had ensured that my life's work, my accumulated wealth, would continue to do good long after I was gone, a true testament to the values I cherished: hard work, integrity, and genuine human connection. The house, the same one David and Sarah had so eagerly discussed selling, remained my sanctuary. It was filled with genuine warmth, with the quiet dignity of Maria, the visits of Robert, and the occasional gatherings of friends who truly cared for me. I often sat in my study, the very room where the truth had been laid bare, looking out at the changing seasons, reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this profound peace. Loyalty, I had learned, was not a birthright. It was a bond forged in mutual respect and love, something that could not be bought or inherited. Greed, left unchecked, had indeed consumed David and Sarah, leaving them with nothing but the bitter taste of what they had lost. My justice, while painful for them, was not about inflicting suffering, but about restoring balance, about ensuring that the fruits of my labor went to nourish true growth and purpose, not to feed parasitic expectations. And in that quiet, elegant justice, in the profound satisfaction of a life truly lived and a legacy genuinely earned, I found my ultimate serenity, a tranquility that no amount of money could ever buy, and which no amount of filial disappointment could ever diminish. My life, once nearly extinguished, had not only been saved but had been redefined, purified by fire, shining brighter, purer, and more purposeful than ever before, a beacon of what true legacy means. My life, once nearly extinguished, had not only been saved but had been redefined, purified by fire, shining brighter, purer, and more purposeful than ever before, a beacon of what true legacy means. The initial shockwave of my will's revelation had subsided, but the aftershocks continued to reverberate through the lives of David and Sarah, echoing their choices back to them with unforgiving precision. David, in his furious desperation, attempted to leverage every single connection he had ever made, or rather, every connection he thought he had made through my name. He tried to borrow money from former acquaintances, to rekindle old business opportunities that had long since passed, all under the pretense of a temporary setback or a misunderstanding with his father. But the whispers had traveled faster than his lies. The truth, ugly and unvarnished, had already seeped into the polite society of Sterling City. People knew David and Sarah's story, not because I had publicly broadcast it, but because their own actions, their own arrogance, had painted it for all to see. David's once eager network of golf buddies and investment partners quickly evaporated. Their polite refusals, their sudden unavailability, their thinly veiled excuses, became a symphony of social ostracization. He found himself uninvited to charity galas, overlooked for business ventures, and quietly removed from exclusive club memberships. The very social standing he had always taken for granted, believing it was his birthright, crumbled to dust. He was no longer the charming, if slightly entitled, son of Elias Thorne. He was simply David, a man whose ambition had been exposed as pure greed stripped bare of his father's backing. The financial pressures mounted relentlessly. The luxurious Sterling City condo he had so confidently moved into, the one he had envisioned furnishing with my inheritance, quickly became a millstone around his neck. The mortgage payments, once easily covered by my gifts and his inflated sense of future wealth, became impossible burdens. He frantically tried to sell it, but the market wasn't as forgiving to a man in a desperate hurry. The price he received was a fraction of what he hoped, barely covering the outstanding debt. He was forced to move into a modest rental apartment, a stark contrast to the opulence he believed he deserved. His once impeccable wardrobe became worn, his expensive car eventually repossessed. The humiliation was a daily companion. He struggled to find stable employment. His resume, once impressive, was now viewed with skepticism. Employers, familiar with his family drama, saw him as a liability, a man whose personal life was a public spectacle of ingratitude. He took on a series of short-term, low-paying jobs, each one a further blow to his fragile ego, each one a stark reminder of the life he had so carelessly discarded. His attempts to start his own ventures, always grandiose and ill-conceived, invariably failed, often leaving him deeper in debt and with even less credibility. He became a cautionary tale, whispered about in hushed tones over coffee and cocktails. Sarah, meanwhile, continued her more subtle, manipulative approach. Her initial tears and pleas had given way to a narrative of victimhood. She spun tales of an ailing father, easily swayed and influenced by a conniving lawyer, casting herself as the innocent daughter wronged by an unjust hand. She contacted distant relatives, trying to garner sympathy, to paint a picture of me as a heartless patriarch. But like David, her efforts were largely in vain. My reputation, built over decades of honest work and quiet generosity, stood firm against their flimsy accusations. People remembered Sarah's constant need for financial boosts, her string of failed business ideas that always required my infusions of cash, her expensive tastes funded entirely by me, her attempts to launch a wellness brand, a vague concept that lacked any real business plan beyond my supposed funding, collapsed entirely. The loan she had taken out, confident in my backing, left her mired in debt, with creditors calling relentlessly. She too found herself in a financial freefall, forced to liquidate personal assets, selling off designer handbags and jewelry that had once been symbols of her effortless luxury. The small Sterling City apartment she had secured, hoping to live rent-free for a time, proved unsustainable. She had to move out, retreating to a cramped rental unit in a less desirable part of town, far from the polished storefronts and chic cafes where she once held court. Her friends, the ones who had reveled in her expensive outings and exclusive invites, quickly faded away, their loyalty as superficial as their designer accessories. They saw her as a drain, a source of constant complaint and financial worry, rather than the glamorous companion she once was. Sarah's dream of a vibrant social life, of being a prominent figure in Sterling City's elite, was shattered. She found herself increasingly isolated, her days filled with the drudgery of low-paying jobs she despised. I occasionally heard about her through Maria, who would sometimes catch snippets of gossip from her own social network. Maria would shake her head sadly, reporting that Sarah was working as a sales associate in a discount clothing store, a place she would never have set foot in before. The irony was almost too much to bear, a poetic justice that she, who had scorned the idea of just working retail, was now doing exactly that day in and day out. It was a public, painful testament to her new reality, a constant reminder of the life she had squandered. The realization of what they had lost, what they had thrown away, settled upon them like a suffocating blanket. It wasn't just the money, though that was certainly a major blow. It was the complete eradication of their expectations, the dismantling of the entire future they had so arrogantly assumed was theirs. They had built their castles in the air, on the foundation of my life's work, and when I refused to die on their timeline, those castles had simply dissolved. The thought of confronting me, of genuinely apologizing, seemed to be beyond them. Their pride, their sense of entitlement, was too deeply ingrained. Instead, their bitterness festered, consuming them from within. I occasionally received hostile, rambling emails from David, filled with accusations and self-pity, never an ounce of genuine remorse. He still believed he was the wronged party, that I was the cruel parent. Sarah would sometimes send me a mournful card, signed with a flourish that betrayed her continued delusion, hoping perhaps that a sentimental appeal might crack my resolve. But my resolve was not made of sentimentality. It was made of steel, forged in the fiery crucible of their betrayal. My heart, once a wellspring of unconditional love for them, had transformed. It now pulsed with a quiet, resolute understanding. There was no hatred, no desire for their suffering, only a profound sadness for the path they had chosen, and an unshakable conviction that I had done the right thing. My peace, however, was not defined by their downfall, but by the quiet triumphs of the Elinor Thorne Foundation. It had become a living, breathing testament to my beloved wife's spirit, and a powerful vehicle for true generosity. Robert Peterson, my steadfast attorney, continued to be an invaluable partner, his quiet integrity and sharp legal mind ensuring the foundation's smooth operation and continued growth. Together, we expanded our board, bringing in passionate individuals from diverse backgrounds. A respected local educator, a successful small business owner who had once received a grant from us, and a community activist known for her tireless work with underserved families. Their commitment and enthusiasm were infectious, reminding me daily of the good that genuine collaboration could achieve. Our scholarship program flourished, supporting more and more bright, deserving students who, like me so many years ago, came from humble beginnings but possessed immense potential. I attended every graduation ceremony, every scholarship luncheon, reveling in the infectious energy of these young minds. I saw their tears of joy, heard their heartfelt speeches of gratitude, and witnessed the profound impact our support had on their lives. One young woman, Maria Elena Rodriguez, a first-generation college student whose parents were immigrants, approached me after receiving her scholarship award. Her eyes, brimming with tears, looked at me with such genuine reverence. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you have given me more than just money. You have given me hope. You have given me a future I never thought possible. My parents, they are so proud." Her words, simple and sincere, echoed in my heart far louder than any praise David or Sarah had ever feigned. They were a balm to the old wounds, a powerful affirmation of the true purpose of my wealth. We launched new initiatives as well. Inspired by my own journey in construction, the foundation funded a vocational training program for young adults in Sterling City, teaching them marketable skills in trades like carpentry, electrical work, and plumbing. I visited the workshops regularly, watching with satisfaction as these young men and women learned practical skills, building confidence and a path to self-sufficiency. It was the kind of hands-on, tangible impact that resonated deeply with the builder in me. Thorne Construction, under the capable leadership of its new management team, continued to thrive. My decision to put the company into a trust, with clear directives for employee benefits and reinvestment into local projects, had fostered an unprecedented level of loyalty and dedication. My employees, many of whom had been with me for decades, expressed their gratitude in countless ways, not through words alone, but through their continued hard work, their innovation, and their commitment to the company's legacy. They saw me not as an absentee owner, but as a wise patriarch who had ensured their future. Maria, my loyal housekeeper, was a constant source of quiet joy and comfort. Her small house in her home country for her aging mother had become a reality, a tangible symbol of my appreciation. She would often share stories of her mother's happiness, her simple, profound gratitude. Maria herself seemed lighter, freer, her devotion to me stemming not from obligation, but from a deep, mutual respect and affection. She truly was family, in a way my own children no longer were. Her own children, grown and settled, continued to visit her regularly, their genuine concern and loving presence a stark contrast to the distant, self-serving interactions I had with David and Sarah. Their simple, unwavering bond reminded me that true family was not about shared blood, but shared values and unconditional love. As the years truly began to stretch out, my life found a rhythm of profound contentment. My health, a miracle by my doctor's estimation, continued to hold strong, a testament to the power of purpose and peace of mind. I continued my painting, my canvases now filled with vibrant landscapes and abstract expressions of joy. My travels expanded, taking me to places I had only dreamed of in my younger, more driven years. I walked the Great Wall of China, explored the Amazon rainforest, and marveled at the ancient temples of Kyoto. Each journey was a new discovery, not just of the world but of myself, of the boundless capacity for joy and wonder that I had nearly let slip away. I forged new friendships, genuine connections with people who appreciated me for the man I had become, for my stories and experiences, unburdened by the weight of past expectations or the shadow of my wealth. They knew me as Elias, a man of quiet strength and deep wisdom, not as the millionaire patriarch. These relationships were built on mutual respect and shared interests, a refreshing change from the transactional nature of my previous connections. There was one particularly vivid memory that stood out, perhaps a year or so after Sarah's last desperate phone call. I was having lunch at a quiet cafe in Sterling City, a place I frequented, enjoying a book and a cup of coffee. Through the window, I saw David. He looked diminished. His expensive suits were replaced by ill-fitting, slightly rumpled clothes. His once confident stride was now a hurried shuffle. He was carrying a stack of delivery boxes, making deliveries for a local restaurant, his head down, trying to avoid eye contact with anyone. He brushed past a group of younger professionals, people who would have once eagerly sought his attention, and they barely registered his presence. I watched him for a moment, a flicker of the old ache in my chest, quickly replaced by a profound sense of detachment. It wasn't pity I felt, nor triumph. It was simply observation, the undeniable evidence of choices made and consequences reaped. He had lost not just my money but his self-respect, his drive, his very identity as the man who was always on the rise. It was a quiet, almost poetic conclusion to his story, one he had written himself. Sarah's path, while less outwardly public, was no less bleak. She remained in Sterling City, trapped in a cycle of low-wage jobs, unable to break free from the invisible chains of debt and self-pity. Her attempts at various side hustles or passion projects invariably faltered, lacking the fundamental discipline and financial acumen she had never bothered to develop. She never married, never built the family she once claimed to desire. Her bitterness, a constant companion, acted as a repellent, pushing away any chance of genuine connection. She became a fixture in the same small, struggling social circles, forever rehashing the tale of her cruel, unjust father, always the victim, never the architect of her own misfortune. I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I would never speak to either of them again. My last conversations, however brief, had affirmed that nothing had changed in their hearts. They still saw me as a source of money, as the one who had wronged them, never acknowledging their own complicity, their own profound failings of love and loyalty. My quiet solitude was not a lonely one. It was filled with the rich tapestry of a life well lived, a legacy truly earned. The Alina Thorne Foundation continued to be a vibrant force for good, a testament to the values I cherished: hard work, integrity, and genuine human connection. I found immense joy in seeing the fruits of my labor, not in bank accounts or luxury possessions, but in the flourishing lives of scholarship recipients, the vibrant hum of new businesses, the laughter emanating from community centers, and the secure retirements of my loyal employees. My house, the same one David and Sarah had so eagerly discussed selling, remained my sanctuary, a place of peace and warmth, filled with the quiet dignity of Maria, the thoughtful visits of Robert, and the joyful gatherings of friends who truly cared for me. I often sat in my study, the very room where the truth had been laid bare, looking out at the changing seasons, reflecting on the winding journey that had brought me to this profound peace. Loyalty, I had learned, was not a birthright. It was a bond forged in mutual respect and love, something that could not be bought or inherited. Greed, left unchecked, had indeed consumed David and Sarah, leaving them with nothing but the bitter taste of what they had lost. My justice, while undeniably painful for them, was not about inflicting suffering, but about restoring balance, about ensuring that the fruits of my labor went to nourish true growth and purpose, not to feed parasitic expectations. And in that quiet, elegant justice, in the profound satisfaction of a life truly lived and a legacy genuinely earned, I found my ultimate serenity, a tranquility that no amount of money could ever buy, and which no amount of filial disappointment could ever diminish. My life, once nearly extinguished, had not only been saved but had been redefined, purified by fire, shining brighter, purer, and more purposeful than ever before, a beacon of what true legacy means. The years continued to pass, each one cementing the undeniable truth of my decision. My health remained remarkably robust for a man of my age, a testament to the profound peace that had settled within me. I was active, engaged, and surrounded by genuine affection, not the conditional sort I had once mistaken for love from my children. The Alina Thorne Foundation became more than just a local charity. It garnered regional recognition, attracting larger donations and forging partnerships with other philanthropic organizations. Its impact grew exponentially, touching thousands of lives through expanded scholarship programs, vocational training initiatives that address the evolving needs of the local economy, and significant investments in community infrastructure. I was often invited to speak at conferences, to share the story of the foundation and its mission. These engagements, far from being a chore, were an opportunity to connect with like-minded individuals, to inspire others to use their resources for genuine good. I found myself in rooms filled with people who were truly passionate about making a difference, their energy contagious, their commitment unwavering. It was a stark contrast to the hollow conversations I used to have with David, always centered on personal gain and financial projections. In these new connections, I found a different kind of family, a family of purpose and shared values. I continued my travels, venturing further afield, often with Robert Peterson or other close friends from the Foundation's board. We explored historical sites, marveled at natural wonders, and engaged with diverse cultures. These experiences enriched my understanding of the world and deepened my appreciation for the simple joys of life. There was a particular moment during a trip to Nepal, standing amidst the serene majesty of the Himalayas, when a profound sense of clarity washed over me. I realized that the mountains, ancient and unyielding, were a perfect metaphor for the principles I now lived by. They stood firm against the winds of change, enduring through time, much like the values of integrity and purpose that had guided me through my own trials. My life had become a panoramic view, vast and breathtaking, entirely of my own making. As for David and Sarah, their trajectories remained stubbornly fixed. David's life was a ceaseless cycle of chasing elusive opportunities, each one ending in disappointment and further debt. He remarried, again to a woman with financial troubles, and their union was marked by constant strife and recriminations. The birth of his children, my grandchildren, was something I learned about through vague rumors, never a direct communication from him. I harbored no ill will towards these innocent souls, but my decision regarding their father remained immutable. I couldn't allow them into my life as a means for David to exploit my wealth or manipulate me. My boundaries were clear, born of self-preservation and the protection of my carefully constructed peace. Sarah's existence, meanwhile, continued to be defined by a quiet desperation. Her bitterness had hardened into a permanent feature of her personality. She drifted from one retail job to another, her former dreams long since abandoned, replaced by a dull resignation. She never found a partner, her constant complaints about her unjust life acting as a barrier to any meaningful relationship. She lived a solitary, unfulfilled life, forever looking back at what she believed had been stolen from her, rather than forward to what she could build. There was a poignant instance, years after their last attempts to reach out, when I received a letter. It wasn't from David or Sarah, but from a former family friend, an older woman who had known my late wife well. She wrote to me expressing her admiration for the work of the Alina Thorne Foundation. Towards the end of the letter, almost as an aside, she mentioned having recently run into Sarah. She seemed tired, Elias, the letter read. She still talks about you, of course, and the will. It's a sad thing to see a life so consumed by what might have been. But I told her, Sarah, your father made his choices and you made yours. Life doesn't owe us anything. We owe it our best. The words resonated deeply. It was a quiet confirmation from an outside voice, a validation that the truth, however painful, had indeed reached some, and that some understood. It wasn't about public shaming. It was about the universal truth that actions have consequences. My own peace was not derived from their misery, but from the unwavering certainty that I had acted with integrity and justice. My actions had not been out of spite, but out of a profound realignment of my values. I had chosen to honor the memory of my beloved Alina and the principles I had always held dear, rather than feed the insatiable greed of those who saw me only as a means to an end. The years passed, turning into decades. My hair, once thick and dark, had thinned and turned entirely white, a silver crown befitting a man who had navigated life's deepest betrayals and emerged with his spirit intact. I continued to dedicate myself to the foundation, ensuring its longevity and expanding its reach. I carefully mentored future leaders, preparing them to carry on Aliner's legacy long after I was gone. My physical strength eventually began to wane, as it must for all mortals, but my mind remained as sharp and clear as ever, my spirit imbued with an unshakable serenity. I spent my final years at home, in the house that held so many memories, good and painful but ultimately peaceful. Maria, now much older but still fiercely loyal, was by my side, a comforting presence. Robert Peterson visited often, not just as my attorney but as a true friend, and we would reminisce about the Foundation's triumphs, the lives it had changed, and the enduring power of genuine purpose. I had lived a full life, a life that, in its final chapters, had become more meaningful than I could have ever imagined. My love for David and Sarah, once so boundless, had transformed into a quiet understanding of human fallibility, of the difficult lessons life sometimes demands. I had not sought revenge in the traditional sense, but justice, a rebalancing of the scales that their greed had so drastically tipped. And in that justice, I had found an unexpected and profound serenity, a tranquility that no amount of money could ever buy, and which no amount of filial disappointment could ever diminish. My life, once nearly extinguished, had not only been saved but had been redefined, purified by fire, shining brighter, purer, and more purposeful than ever before, a beacon of what true legacy means, a testament to the enduring power of integrity and the quiet strength of an unyielding spirit.